Hi, everybody. I'm Jenny Gage, and this is Life Take Two, where I share my transition out of Mormon trad wife life. If you've watched my channel at all, you know that a lot of my content is feminist. You've also probably seen a guy in the background who I sometimes bring on camera. This is my partner, Kevin. Somewhere along the line, feminists have earned the label of being man-hating, either lesbians or single cat ladies. And I get a lot of questions about the fact that I am so feminist and also in a relationship with a man. Today, I'd like to answer some of those questions by sharing with you how Kevin and I have structured our relationship in a way that makes my feminist little self happy as a clam while also protecting his Christian male self. After being raised in a very traditional Mormon family and then spending 24 years in a very traditional Mormon family as a stay-at-home mom, after my faith transition and my divorce, I definitely swung to the other end of the spectrum and was very much the woke feminist and had decided to just be single for life. But then I started dating and I really enjoyed it. And then I fell in love with Kevin. And I have to tell you that this was one of the biggest conflicts in my entire life that I've ever had to deal with. I had this problem of I love this man and I actually want to be committed to this man, but I don't want to do it in the same way that everybody has done it for so many years. The beginning was just a hot mess. When we first blended our families, I went right back to all of my Mormon trad wife habits. And then I started to freak out because that definitely wasn't what I wanted to do, but I didn't see another option. Fortunately, I had a pack of experts to help me really intentionally structure our relationship. Family law attorneys, divorce coaches, psychologists, psychiatrists, wealth planners, accountants, and some authors and relational experts. And I powwowed with them. And one of my biggest takeaways was our marriage system currently is not protective of individuals and is very unprotective of women and children, especially. With the help of my experts, I penciled out a relationship system. And I know that doesn't sound romantic at all, but let me tell you, divorce is not romantic. And I had just gone through a really big one. And that system of relationships would eventually turn into the Man Proof Your Life program that I teach to private clients and in workshops. And Kevin and I decided to dive in. Let me share with you some of the details of our non-traditional relationship. And I want to lead with this caveat. None of the decisions that we made were just for how it looked on the outside or to put a label on it. It wasn't just, I'm a feminist, so I can't get married. Every decision that we made was protective, both of our relationship and then of us as individuals and our children and families and assets, etc. We have structured things in a way that is extremely protective, unlike the current marriage law. First up, and this is the biggest question that I get from people, are you married? The answer to that is yes and no. Now, Kevin is a conservative Christian. His family is all Christian. He works for a Christian organization. His children are Christian, and he believes in the Bible. He believes in marriage. He doesn't believe in just living with somebody outside of marriage. So to protect his beliefs and his family and let him be that example for his kids of doing the right thing, it was important for him to get married. I do not believe in marriage. When Kevin and I first met, I was Christian, but I didn't necessarily believe that you had to be married. And my marriage destroyed my life. And I just simply didn't want to be entangled in that way. So we came up with something that worked for both of us. At the core, what we did was to protect our relationship, make that commitment to one another, and also protect our children. It didn't feel right to me either just to move in together because my kids had already gone through a really rocky breakup. I felt like all of us needed that rite of passage, that ritual, to symbolize that we are making a deeper and more long-lasting commitment to one another. Here's what we decided on. We had a church wedding. We are registered on the Christian church as husband and wife. And that made all of the Christian family happy. It made Kevin very happy. It was deeply significant to him. We said our vows. So we are married in the eyes of Jesus. But then we didn't register as husband and wife. We registered instead as domestic partners. And that was protective of both of us in a variety of ways. In the state of Arizona, the minute you get married, everything becomes community property, 50-50. And at the time when Kevin and I were blending our families, after me being a stay-at-home mom for 24 years, I was exploring ways to provide for myself and my children. If Kevin and I were married and I ended up making more money than him, then I would run the risk of potentially having to pay him alimony should we divorce. I ran the risk of everything that I owned being split 50-50 and also having to have divorce attorneys should we want to break up and spending money in court again. And that simply wasn't a risk that I was willing to take. Domestic partnership in the state of Arizona keeps all property brought into the relationship separate. And it's as simple as just going to court, paying a fee, filing as domestic partners. There are a couple really important benefits to domestic partnership in the state of Arizona. It gives us the right to visit one another in the hospital and medical situations. And in some cases, some insurance companies and financial institutions look at domestic partnership the same as they do marriage. Next up, people ask a lot, will we ever get married at some point in the future? Maybe. If it becomes more protective of our futures to be married so that we can make like end of life decisions and things like that. And especially for me, losing all of my retirement in my first divorce, if I need access to Kevin's Social Security and inheritance and things like that, then we may make the decision to get married legally. A few more little details about our wedding. Kevin, more often than not, refers to our wedding as our wedding because that's what it was to him. I, more often than not, refer to it as our commitment ceremony. It means the same to both of us. It's just the verbiage. Kevin often refers to me as his wife. I often refer to him as my partner. I don't like the terms husband and wife. My husband was a monster. He was an abuser. And I would rather have a different label for Kevin. I also think that the husband and wife thing is inherently patriarchal and sexist. And the word partner it makes my heart warm every time I see it. It's deeply meaningful to me in a way that the word husband just simply isn't. Our wedding/commitment ceremony happened during the pandemic. So we weren't allowed to have real people in the church, which actually was extremely protective of our finances. We only had our kids, a couple of witnesses, and the pastor in the little sanctuary with us. And then everybody else was just tuned in on Zoom, which was kind of cool because nobody had to spend money on plane tickets. I didn't have to have a huge fancy dress. We didn't have flower arrangements in the chapel or anything like that. And it allowed people who are like way too far away to have come in person to tune in. Weddings, by the way, are big business for the capitalistic patriarchal machine. And I personally hate the way that our most intimate human moments are hijacked and monetized. So even if I was a millionaire, I'm personally opposed to spending money on something that should be a personal, private, organic moment between two human beings. That moment of committing to walk side by side. So I had a $19 Target dress, some high heels from a thrift store, did my own hair, did my own makeup. Kevin wore a suit and tie. And I think I spent about $25 on flowers at Trader Joe's, used my Mormon crafty girl skills to make my bridal bouquet with a $2 chunk of foam and some ribbon from Michael. And of course, in opposition to capitalism and the patriarchy, I do not support the diamond industry at all, period, ever for any reason. So my ring is really meaningful to me. You guys will see that I wear all kinds of different rings because the wedding ring itself is not significant, though I do think that the symbol of having a ring on my finger, and Kevin wears one too, is meaningful to both of us. My original engagement ring is actually at the jeweler right now, but this was the ring that Kevin bought me after our wedding from a Navajo artist outside of Page at a jewelry stand. This is a chunk of turquoise. I think this ring was like $45. And by the way, the reason that men gave women diamonds was that they didn't have access to bank accounts, couldn't get their own financing, couldn't start their own businesses, and were the property of their husbands. So that diamond is gifted to the woman in case of divorce so that she can sell it. I can make my own money. We no longer need diamonds. This part of patriarchy needs to die. I made my own invitations on Canva, texted them to my friends and family. And the few friends that we had that wanted to celebrate with us afterwards, we went to the Cheesecake Factory for lunch, where everybody paid for their own dinner. Even though we're not legally filed as husband and wife, we did have the option of going to court and changing my last name to Kevin's last name. I feel like this is one of the most sexist things that we still have going on in America. Women should not have to lose their identities to get married. And I had already had 3 last names. I didn't want a 4th. If Kevin and I didn't work out, maybe I'd be on to last name number 5 at some point. After my divorce from Jake, I had immediately dropped his last name and taken my dad's birth name rather than my maiden name. And my last name is so meaningful to me that as we considered me taking Kevin's name, I just felt like it was a loss of my identity that I just simply wasn't willing to engage in. We finally had a conversation about it just a couple nights before our ceremony. And I asked him, in all honesty, not being satirical, not being sarcastic at all, I asked him if he would take my last name. Would you consider changing your last name to Gage? Kevin is a sweetheart. I love him. He's ultra feminist. But I mean, this is just how we roll in America. He kind of laughed and he said, my dad would be so sad if I gave up his last name. And I responded, my dad would be so sad if I gave up his last name. And that was when the decision was made. A lot of my friends advised against having separate last names as a couple. They're like, well, how can you ever be the Smith family if one of you has this last name and one of you has that last name? And we also have different last names amongst our children. So I wondered how that would work. If I go to school and it's like, yes, here's my last name, but my child's last name is this, am I going to feel some sort of a disconnect? And will this be complicated? Because again, at the end of the day, every decision that we're making is to protect our connections, our relationships, and our children. After 5 years of being in a committed relationship with a different last name than my partner, here's my take. I absolutely love it. I will never change it. I wish that I had done this the first time around. I am me. I'm not just Mrs. Kevin. I'm not just his helpmeet. I am my own self, and that in no way diminishes my relationship with Kevin. In fact, I think that he looks at me with more respect because I am me. And it's absolutely never a problem with the kids. I never go into the school and say, hi, I'm Jenny Gage, and I'm here to get this kid with a totally last name. It's never a problem. It's never an issue. And on the topic of, well, how do we ever say, well, we're the Smith family? Well, we're not. We say all three names. We're the Kevins and the Gages and the kids. And it's kind of hyphenated. We turn it into one long word. We are the blah, blah, blah family. One of the other big questions that I get around our relationship is finances. When I got married the first time at age 20 to my Mormon returned missionary husband, it was mi casa es su casa, whatever is yours is mine. We immediately just got one bank account, which he then kicked me off of. So then I had an allowance system with cash for the rest of my married life until right up to the end. And that is just an absolute recipe for disaster. So Kevin and I have 3 separate bank accounts. We do have a combined account where the bills that we share come out of. Then Kevin has his own separate bank account. So if he has a cash gift or sells some personal property or has any expenses for his kids, that money goes into that bank account. I can see it. We have full disclosure. I can get on his phone at any moment and see it, but I can't touch it. There's no way for me ever to take that money out of that bank account. It's his. Then I have my own savings account over here. Now, the number one key ingredient to the separate bank accounts is full disclosure, absolute transparency, no wiggle room for dishonesty, because there's a lot of wiggle room for dishonesty. Whenever I put money into my account, I let Kevin know my child support check just dropped. I'm going to roll that into that account. I just got this paycheck for my windshield business. I'm going to roll that into this account. My YouTube money now goes into that account. The separate accounts is protective in 3 different ways. First of all, should the relationship end, we already have separate savings. We just walk away. We're not fighting over that joint account. Secondly, very rarely do couples have the same financial habit. So if she's a spender over here and he's a saver over there, that's fine. You have your own separate account. He can be a saver all he wants and she can be a spender all she wants. You don't have to always be working on the same financial goals. That reduces so much tension in a relationship. Number 3, and this is the most important one for me, we ladies rarely have full financial autonomy in relationships. And the separate accounts provides that while also allowing us to engage in a long-term committed relationship without having to tangle the finances up so much. Well, Kevin and I discuss all of the incomings and outgoings from that joint account. That's not true of my personal account. If I want to buy myself some flowers at Trader Joe's or concert ticket or get my son some shoes and I have the money in my account, I do it. I don't have to discuss that at all. I have to say that the separate bank accounts thing makes me so happy that I'm literally like tingling even talking about it. It works. And of course, if you're married, you do need to have a prenup that designates those accounts as non divisible in case of divorce. In conclusion, I do think it's possible for a feminist to engage in a happy, healthy relationship with a man who is also feeling happy and healthy over there. And by the way, I don't usually refer to our relationship as a marriage. I do say the word partnership, and we're not married, we're blended. You'll hear that a lot. I talk about the day that we blended, and I talk about blending our family. Now, I'd love to hear from you. Are you married, blended, partnered, wed? And is there anything that you'd like to change?